Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom, sponsored by K-12 Sports Tech on the Education Lady podcast. Before we meet this week's Wednesday Wisdom guest, we are going to give a shout out to our sponsors. Now, don't hit that fast forward button. These are all companies that I used as an athletic director. I highly recommend that you use them too. So take the next 3 minutes, listen to our shout outs, then listen to our Wednesday Wisdom guest, and then go and visit these sponsors if you're not already using them. I'm telling you, you're going to be glad you did. Here we go. We want to thank K-12 Sports Tech for sponsoring Wednesday Wisdom. K-12 Sports Tech helps athletic directors and sports vendors connect through education and hands-on consulting services. Athletic directors are also invited to join the K-12 Sports Tech AD think tank and help influence how companies shape their tech to better serve schools. To get started, all you have to do is go to k12sportstech.com. That's k12sportstech.com. We also want to say thanks to Gipper. Your students are on social media, and if you're not creating content to celebrate their accomplishments and promote your own program, you're missing out on a great opportunity. Go to Gipper.com. They'll have you creating world-class content in seconds, and it's so easy, even I can do it. That's Gipper.com. Check them out today. We'd like to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their score boards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. We'd like to thank Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. Now, I didn't get my master's from Ohio University, but my assistant athletic director did, along with thousands of others. And it was a great experience. It's very affordable, just 20 months, totally online. And while you're completing your master's degree, you're also completing 11 NIAAA leadership training courses. That's ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Masters. We'd like to say thanks to Snap Raise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and then been disappointed in the results? Those days are gone. Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with great success. I'm telling you, it works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great platforms, but if you're looking for a fundraiser, you just found it. It's snapraise.com. We'd like to thank Hometown Ticketing for their support. Go to hometownticketing.com. They're the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Whether it's more support, more security, or more customization, Hometown is here to make the best online ticketing solution for you. It's hometownticketing.com. We'd like to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame. You're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the events, or show off your school's Hall of Fame. Go to Vital Signs Wall of Fame and take a look at their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to share your school's unique history and your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. We'd like to thank Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform you're going to use every single day, whether it's scheduling, rosters, results, communication. Their athletic eligibility and clearance platform alone is worth the price. Go to homecampus.com to get started. Mention the podcast. That's homecampus.com. We'd like to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic directors already get feedback, but a lot of times it's from a very small group that only wants to complain. Athletic Surveys will connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% that supports your program. And having that data in your hands is incredibly valuable, especially when you're meeting with a frustrated parent, maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. It's athleticsurveys.com. And we'd like to thank Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a huddle school, and our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided. Our student athletes love the videos, our parents love the streaming, but there is so much more. Join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a huddle school. Welcome back, everybody, to another segment of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest today has an incredible background. She is a human behavior expert. She's a master coach. She's also a best-selling author. The name of her book is called Healing Your Map. We're going to hear about that and a whole lot more. But our guest today is Jodee Gibson. Jodee, welcome to Wednesday Wisdom.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invite. I'm really excited to jam with you today and to really cover some fun things. And I can't wait to get into conversation.
Well, you and I were connected by a mutual friend. And, as we were talking, I just said, boy, this is going to be a great fit for our podcast. So we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give them that quick bio, where you were born, where you grew up. Tell us your life story in 2 minutes. Okay. And then I want to hear what you have to share about, this fascinating topic.
Absolutely. So through and through, I'm definitely a Detroit girl. I'm from Detroit, and we say Detroit-ish, right? Metropolitan Detroit. I've traveled the world. I've spoke all over the world, and I still keep landing back here in Detroit. A little bit about me. I've been an athlete my whole life. So I was a figure skater, which started at the mere age of 3. And I just share that for context, saying it was built into my DNA. Like, I don't ever remember a time that I didn't skate. Against all judgment, I actually skated when I was pregnant, big, huge belly, and all the things, but I candidly share. A little bit about my background, though. I feel like I came from this wild background, and I've always been an out-of-the-box thinker. I've always been the person that pushes back and asks why, and I have to know how things work. And I think I've also been a natural leader, because I'm the one that will take the off the beaten path. I'll take people, or I'll go and they follow, right? And so I've always had this natural space of, hey, Jodee. And so people have always said, hey, Jodee, what do you think about this? Or, hey, Jodee, what would you do in this situation? And in honoring the natural part of who I was, and in honoring the wild, rebellious, defiant kid that I was, it really led me into leadership. And so I candidly share that I barely graduated from high school. I shortly thereafter became a mom and decided I had to go back to college, or to college, whatever that looks like. It took me 9 years to get a 2-year degree to get my associates, because I was just really dysfunctional in my thinking, and I was kind of all over the place. Still skating, still doing all the things. But through that space, I was introduced to Tony Robbins. I was introduced to some really cool leaders who were leading from their own drum, right? They were leading from their own lens. And it led me into finishing school. I finished my associates, I finished undergrad. I went to law school for a year, which is kind of a crazy story. And then I finished grad school in public service leadership. And I share that in saying my dad also is a Hall of Famer coach in volleyball. And I feel like his presence was always around me in the way that I thought and the way that I would think outside the box. He too is a pretty creative human. But I share that in saying I fell in love with neurolinguistic programming, which led me into professional coaching, which led me into trauma work, which I think is a wild stair-step thing. But I just share that in saying I was this natural coach, right? That went then studied NLP formally, and then formally studied coaching, meaning professional coaching. And then what I came to stumble upon was all these things and these idiosyncrasies that we meet with players, with athletes, with students, with people. The foundation of it really is environmental, or maybe I'll call it, I don't want to get on the trauma train, right? But it's this emotional, the lack of emotional development. And so at one point in time, they were seized in development, and now they're kind of functioning from that stuck space. And so, like my natural self, I had to dig to the bottom of it and figure out why, which led me to writing this book. And so that's kind of me in a nutshell. I'm very curious. I'm very out of the box thinking. And I'm going to bring things forward today that are going to make people say, what did she just say? How is that connected to this? But it's really fun. And I also am very practical, hands-on. So I'm not going to just talk and leave people hanging. I'm going to give them things that they can implement right now And then I'm going to show them how and why it affects change. And so it's kind of fun.
Well, again, as you and I were talking originally, I could just see this having tremendous application for our listeners. We have athletic directors who we say they're coaching the coaches, but a lot of times there hasn't been a lot of, let's say, initial training when they take the job. Our coaches who listen, they're great with X's and O's, and they're great with kids too. But, for this aspect of, let's say, performance, whether it's athletic performance, personal performance, human performance, I think any additional training and science is certainly going to help our listeners. So, um, we can talk about the book next, or we can talk about some of your training. I'm just going to get out of the way and say, Jodee, what do you have for our listeners?
For sure. And thank you so much. I feel like I'm going to start off with the idea of the book just because for me, that was how I built. I feel like creating the book and surfacing this idea allows me to then talk freely because people understand the concept. So just to give like a 90-second overview of the book is titled Healing Your Map. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the things. But I share it in saying I have this concept that at the moment that people are born, they're given a blank map. And so imagine that your map then collects every single life experience you've ever encountered. So every sound, every color, every success, every failure, every name, every event, everything you've ever experienced is recorded on your map, including the things your coach says to you, the things your parents say to you. And then that map becomes the lens through which you filter the world. And so if it was anchored on my map when I was 10 or 15 years old, that I'm slow or that and I mean slow in pace, right? Or that I'm always late or that I'm not paying attention or like all the words that are spoken into us are still retrieved as adults. And so a lot of times people say, well, who built the map? And then I candidly say the map was built by, I coined this term called the trusted voice. And so as little tiny kids, the voices that we trusted, right? The people that were speaking into us that we trusted helped create the moral entity or the foundation of our map. And I candidly share that saying it's not that it's right, wrong, or indifferent, but that map was created by the voices that we trusted. And in the book, you'll see that I say that the trusted voice is parents, teachers, coaches, and healthcare professionals. Because I think it's really the collection of those voices that creates that sounding board from which then our peers will say, hey, let's skip school, or hey, let's skip practice, or let's do this crazy thing. And part of us goes, oh, I don't know if I should, because the trusted voice said I probably shouldn't do that. And so even if we didn't have a parent present that said that was a bad idea, we may have had a coach, right? And so I candidly say the power that a coach's voice has on a child's map is insane. Like it's for life. So the words that are spoken into a child will forever be the ones they retrieve today. And I candidly say, imagine for some of the coaches that are listening or the ADs, think about who spoke those words into you. If you had to think about whether it's a limiting belief or an empowering one, odds are high it was one of those four people that created that space for you. So if somebody told you that you were an incredible player, it was probably your coach, and you lean into that today without knowing. And so my whole idea of creating awareness for people is to teach leaders and to teach really the trusted voice how powerful their voice is and how to use it with great intention. Make sense?
No, absolutely. Again, I've been doing this for a long time, and it takes a while, I think, in your career as a coach or as an athletic director, as a leader, to we always have the phrase, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And in certain, let's say, categories, sometimes it takes you longer to realize, hey, this is valuable stuff. Um, most of our listeners are athletic directors, but we have some people that are, at the beginning of their career. Um, Here's my analogy, so stay with me.
Sure.
Mental performance training. I don't think there's a single coach or AD that would deny that it is valuable, maybe even extremely valuable for overall performance. At the same time, talking with coaches and getting them to uh, devote a couple of minutes a week to this sort of thing can sometimes be like pulling teeth. Oh yeah, it's important, but I got to run some more plays or I got to do some more drills. You know, what are, from your perspective as a master coach, what are some, what can you say to that population that I just described, which is probably me as a young
Yeah.
coach? Hey, this is really important stuff.
Sure. And it's all of us, right? Because all of us want to get to the outcome, but how much attention are we paying to the input, right? And I candidly say, like, um, if you were going to bake a cake or whatever you're going to make, the ingredients are often more important than the outcome of the cake. And so a lot of times we're just focused on what comes out of the oven, and it keeps coming out wrong, keeps coming out wrong, and we're shouting and we're yelling and we're mad because it's coming out wrong without ever investigating. This kid completely skipped the eggs, or the kid used a cup of gasoline instead of a cup of oil, right? And so it's about going back to the recipe and saying, let me make sure that the recipe is built, because if the recipe is good, the cake's going to come out every single time. And so, although none of us want to slow down, that makes sense. Slowing down sometimes and explaining things makes coaching so much easier. And I'll pair into that, right? Communication is the way that we convey information. If we're not great at communication, we're often just getting mad at the misinformation or the mixed message, the crossed wires, right? We're like, can this kid even hear me? Or we'll say to them, I don't want to say it again. And we start shouting because we're annoyed that they're not understanding the message. And whether that be a coach of ours, right? Or it's the AD speaking to his coaches, right? If he's trying to convey this to his coaches, what's the greatest way to get to the outcome? And I'd love to share some examples if you're open to it.
No, absolutely. And that was going to be my next question. I'm sure you have some great success stories. That's what I call them, success stories. But absolutely, give us those examples for those people who are going to say, hey, show me.
Sure, absolutely. And so it kind of what I was sharing earlier, the words that we speak into our kids become the voice that they navigate with for the rest of their life. And so when we say things to people like, hey, you're late, right? Which is kind of a negative command. What would it feel like to instead say, hey, how can I help you get here on time? Or what's preventing you from getting here on time? And I share that in saying somebody may not have built a good habit yet, and or if it's a player, right? We have to think about all the people that players depend on to get them there, whether it's a parent, if they have a parent that's normalized being late, and now that's being handed down to the player, and the parent's dismissing the player saying, no, I have to be there on time. My coach is going to get me, right? So it's about recognizing, and when you ask questions to a kid or an adult or to anybody, you're inviting self-discovery. So if we instead say, hey, another example I use is you're doing it wrong, right? So if I say to a kid, hey, you're doing it wrong, or if I say to a coach, I think the way you're doing it's wrong, instead of saying, hey, what about this is working and what about it is not working? And so when we invite self-discovery, we literally change someone's brain. Think about doing a crossword puzzle, and if all the boxes were lightly filled in with all the words, would you really want to sit down and do it? You probably wouldn't, right? Because we get this natural high off of going, oh my gosh, I found the answer, or oh my gosh, I did it right. Or so when you self-discover something, your brain sets off endorphins. Your brain is flooded with happy chemicals that then changes the way that you think about things. Much the same with shame, right? So when we just shout at kids or we shout at the people that we're leading, we're inviting shame, which closes them down. It throws them into fight or flight, and they're setting off a different set of chemicals. Right now, they're setting off cortisol, and they're in this space where their creativity has been stifled. And so it's always incredible to me when I see coaches yelling at players and then expecting the creativity to come, or expecting them to have this embodied response, right? We want players to play in their body, not in their head. And so to give them access to their body is helping them saying, we might say things like, what do you hear me saying? Or where does your hand or your foot or your leg need to be in order for that play to work? Or when is the appropriate time to transition into that? So I come from a long line of volleyball, even though I didn't play, right? But, or to say, who do you need to be, who are you looking at that can who are you looking at that can influence your decision? And so if somebody says, oh, well, when the setter releases the ball, I start transitioning. Or if the kid's like, oh, I don't know. Okay, well, then there's the gap. The gap is in, so the more questions that we ask, the more we uncover where the actual gap is that's not allowing the outcome. And so I feel like this is multi-layered in just saying the more we invite self-discovery for the coach and for the player, for the leader, for the teacher, for the student, the more information we have to work with. And so the more information we have, the more deeper of an understanding, embodied and mental, the player and the coach have. And now you can make more edits because you have more information to work with. Does it make sense?
No, absolutely. I just, love the terminology and the picture that you paint there. Um, boy, I would love to just go into chapter by chapter, but we don't want to give away the book. We want to buy the book.
Sure.
What are maybe one or two more nuggets from the book that you really, if you only had the time I was giving you, you'd want to share with our listeners?
Sure. I'll give you two more things. I'm going to talk about the word don't, and then I'm going to talk about expand and contract real fast. Our brain's ability to process the word don't is non-existent, meaning it completely gets lost in translation. It, right? So if we say to somebody, don't stop, it might be smarter to say, keep going, or push through, or go until I say stop, or go until you hit X, right? A lot of times in volleyball, I'll hear coaches say, don't lose track of the ball. What our brain does is it negates that first word, and what it hears is lose track of the ball. Or if I say don't stop or don't forget, what we process is stop or forget. And so in a word like don't lose track of the ball, you might instead say follow the ball. And so telling a kid's brain or anybody's, giving them the immediate command of what you want them to do versus giving them a negative command that they then have to translate, right? So if somebody tells me don't lose track of the ball, I'm like, okay, don't lose track of the ball, which means I have to find the ball and then I should probably follow the ball. But think about timing in a game or in athletics, right? Time is everything. And so in saying follow the ball, I'm like, oh, follow the ball. I immediately have a command that I know what to do versus me not knowing what to do. And so the word don't is really playful. And if you sit down or you ask your assistant coach or anybody around you, what comments do I usually say that start with this phrase don't? And then start rewording what is the intention behind that statement. You'll get so much further. So I share that as one of my faves. The other one of my favorite things is called expand and contract. And so all language either makes us expand and it opens up this ability to be creative and innovative and we can move and like the world is our oyster, right? We have all these options, or language completely contracts us and it shuts us down and we like seize in development, we seize in motion. And so it's just about understanding is the foundation of my communication as the leader, is it inviting and open or is it really closed? And so if it's closed and I'm asking people to bring solutions or to change, and my language isn't inviting that, how much change can I expect? Versus if it's really wide open and I'm inviting people to think creatively and I'm as a leader modeling this really wide space, I want to say the outcome or the solutions that people will find because you've invited them to that space is endless. And so I think that this is also how cultures are built, right? You'll see incredible cultures or you'll see really toxic ones. And so it's all founded in language.
Yeah, I love how you threw in culture because it's such a, I'm not going to say it's an overused word, but it's a frequently used word talking about athletic programs and teams. Oh, they've got a great culture. Um,
Sure.
and the follow-up question for me has always been, well, why? What are they doing? But having the kids, dialed in because they are basically, that reflection of the culture. A lot of coaches now are using this term. They're developing culture keepers, getting the
Right.
freshmen, sophomores, et cetera, all the way up through to keep the culture going. Very cool stuff.
Yeah, I was going to share too, and I'm just going to weave this in there. Think about we're always creating culture. And so if I'm inviting a toxic culture and I'm really unaware of it, yet I often see it in my players and the way that they talk to each other, what's the source of that, right? And so if I'm expecting this really positive culture, how does that start with me and who do I need to be in order to let that water flow downhill?
Oh no, absolutely. And I still, I'll mention this, when I was a high school college athlete in the decade of the 70s, so very long ago, um, our coaches didn't even think about, communication or relationships or things like that. They were just coaching. And it, I don't remember feeling, abused or, spoken down to. That's just how coaches were. And that's how kids were. But now, 100 years later, it's a much different world, and kids are different, and coaches need to adjust. And, this is just some really, really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Once again, the name of the book is Healing Your Map.
Yes.
And if you take listeners, if you take a look at it,
Share the
it's gonna instantly make sense to you. Uh, Jodee, how do they find the book? And then also, how do they connect with you? And listeners, you got a tremendous resource here. How do they find out about all things Jodee Gibson?
Absolutely, thank you. So the book is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It might be in your local bookstores. It's bright yellow with intention. And yeah, like you shared, as soon as your eyes land on it, you'll go, that's the book. And secondly, how can they find me? My website is jodeegibson.coach, and Jodee is spelled with two E's. So it's Jodee Gibson.coach. I think if you also just threw my name spelled right in Google, you'll find me. I'm also on all the social media platforms, and my handle is just at Jodee Gibson.
Mhm. Well, Jodee, thanks so much for sharing with our listeners. Thanks for all you do in this space, and all the best moving forward.
Thank you so much. I feel like I forgot to share too. I do a really cool piece called How Words Work, and it's geared towards athletics. It's geared towards coaches, and it's really fun.
Well, we'll put all the contact information in the show notes. Again, put in Jodee, that's Jodee Gibson, and it'll probably pop up on your search engine. But check out the book, Healing Your Map. And Jodee, thanks again for coming on, sharing with our listeners. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
For our listeners, we appreciate you. And just a reminder, we upload the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do this segment every single week, and just about every day, we try to share stories and best practices. So come back and join us again for another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. Thanks again for listening. Once again, that was Jodee Gibson. Check it out. Check out her new book, Healing Your Map. Before we go, as always, we want to thank our sponsors. K-12 Sports Tech is the named sponsor for Wednesday Wisdom. We also want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing. I want to thank Snap Raise. I want to say thanks to Huddle and Gipper. I want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame and Ohio University's Online Masters. We'd like to thank Home Campus, Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack, and Sideline Interactive. Thanks again to all of our sponsors. Thanks to our listeners. We'll see you next time on the Educational AD Podcast.